Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm here joined on set by criminal defense attorney Norman Williams. We're going to break down the biggest live trials and legal stories in the news today. We're going to be live in two different courtrooms, a lot to cover, so let's get started. Well, I got to tell you don't see that every day, a 7-year-old testifying. Norman, that is gutsy for the prosecution to put a 7-year-old on the stand. What do you think the impact of her words were for this jury?
It's going to crush their hearts. I mean, she's so present. And the funny thing is, a lot of adult witnesses will respond to a question by saying, uh-huh. And you keep telling them, is that a yes? Is that a yes? She did it once, got corrected once, and she didn't make the mistake again.
Now, she talks about being spanked, and we're going to play some of that. The idea of being spanked with a belt, does that fall into the category of cruelty to children in the first degree or the second degree or aggravated battery or aggravated assault? These are some of the charges that the Rosenbaums face.
I don't know. To be really honest, I mean, I was spanked with a belt. Most people I know my age were spanked with a belt, depending on, where your parents are from. But again, it can be abuse.
Look at the chart. Look at what they're charged with. They're charged with really inflicting serious injuries, and one of the girls died. So based upon what the jury just heard, is that enough for them to, not the murder charge at least, but enough for them to say there's abuse here?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. In today's world, today's climate, for sure.
All right. Well, let's continue on with her testimony, because really it's incredible to hear this. This is more of Millie. Again, she was 7 years old now, but 5 years old when this all went down. Okay, let's break down where we are right now here, Norman, because not only did the jury just hear from this young girl, you couple that with the testimony from yesterday and really some explosive testimony with a pediatric orthopedist who reviewed some of the injuries of Layla about a month before she ultimately died and said, this isn't injuries from what the Rosenbaums are saying, her falling in her grandmother's hole or gymnastics. This looks like blunt force trauma.
Right.
And then there was some time between, I think Jennifer Rosenbaum waited, 2 days before actually treating this broken leg on the part of this young little girl that we're showing right here. What is the jury thinking at this point?
I think they're focusing in on the fact that these two girls were abused. I mean, the types of injuries that this poor child sustained just don't come from slip and falls and normal childhood accidents. Just no.
So, I mean, the defense is kind of put in a corner here because you're hearing this testimony where these experts are coming forward and saying this isn't typical child behavior. Right. On top of that, if you look at the day in question, choking on chicken, there's nothing to suggest that, including the resuscitation efforts, that wouldn't have caused a transected pancreas.
Exactly, right.
So what's the defense going to do?
I don't know what they can do, actually. I mean, the transected pancreas is it's through the roof.
I mean, they're poking holes here and there on how procedures was done, and also about the idea of maybe it's possible X, Y, and Z happened. But I mean, when they're handed the case and they can call their own witnesses, who can they call to support their theory that this was all an accident and there was no abuse?
I mean, the only thing that they can do is try to get a medical expert to say that something different happened than what did.
Do they want parents on this jury? Because in one hand, you could say, look, if there are parents on this jury, they're like, oh yeah, we have kids, and yeah, they get injured here and there, they get sick here and there. There's nothing out of the ordinary. Or parents, the worst case scenario for them to have on this jury.
This is the type of case where it really doesn't matter. You don't need to be a parent to understand what should not happen to a child. Mm-hmm. All human beings are children. All human beings grow up and they experience good things and they experience bad things. I mean, the problem with having parents on the jury is it just focuses your feelings of bad things a bit. It does. Yeah, the defense, though, is trying to always say, look, this is just common. There's nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, look, they keep pointing the finger that these children were put in the custody of the Rosenbaums for a reason. Right. They seem to be ideal foster parents. Right. And, there's people who haven't observed at least a degree of abuse. They see the injuries, but they don't see the abuse. And obviously, this young girl takes the stand. She doesn't say, they beat me, they punched me. They say, she says I was spanked. But where are we going? I mean, what do you think the jury has to fill in some blanks here? I don't think so. I mean, look, they can just look at the damage to the poor girl's body. Right. And from there, decide how they feel about the Rosenbaums and whatever proof the government presents. You're also looking at a 2-year-old as opposed to a 12-year-old. I mean, there's only so much. Who else would have caused this? I mean, who else would have done this? And so these are the questions that this jury is going to be having to answer. We're going to take a quick break. I think we can jump live when we get back, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All right, so it looks like a little feed issue right there. Norman, let me ask you this. You have these two foster parents who are on trial, but also the government's on trial in a way as well, the Division of Family and Children's Services. I mean, why didn't they act sooner if there was something wrong? In fact, saying I think it was Miss Tamara Warner had said that, you know, she sees the girl looks kind of skinny and says, oh, let's feed her more cake. Right. That's the answer?
No, it's not. I mean, it's amazing when us adults drop the ball on the care of kids. You know, it's just so sad. And a lot of times in life, there are warning signs that we just don't follow, we don't heed. It's like that old expression, when you hear the doorbell ring, you really need to answer the door and see who's there.
Is there a reluctance to try to interfere? Is there a presumption that the foster parents are doing the right thing? And again, not to discount the foster care system, but we're not talking about the biological parents here. We're talking about complete strangers. Wouldn't there be more attention put in just to follow up what's going on here?
You would think so, but I think sometimes people are lulled to sleep in certain situations, like in this one, where you have foster parents that kind of step up and care for a child when they know that the mom and the dad can't do the right thing. You know, you kind of just assume that they're going to be okay, that they're going to be the good people, that they're not going to make any mistakes. Because why would a person that wants to abuse a child be a foster parent?
That's the question, though, isn't it? And look, you got to feel for these two little girls. They had such a tough life going from home to home, and now they're put into this home, and look what ultimately happens to Layla. Again, the presumption of innocence here, but again, it's just a tragic result that this 2-year-old girl is no longer here. We're going to jump back live again. Samantha White on stand. What's interesting to note is that during the course of this trial, the DFCS has admitted wrongdoing. We saw Ebony Taylor, who was a supervisor, said these kids should have never even put in the care of the Rosenbaums when they did a background search on Jennifer Rosen. They didn't even look at her maiden name. They would have seen that she was herself a product of the foster care system, and maybe she wouldn't have gotten these children. They also said that an evaluation that was done was signed off by the wrong person. Her supervisor, who was also dismissed, said that she was inexperienced, that Miss White was inexperienced. How does this domino effect happen? How does everybody keep making mistakes when it comes to these two little kids?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's almost like a perfect storm. Like everything that can go wrong seemed to have gone wrong, and that does happen sometimes.
And I know that I think Ms. Smith is wound up in a lawsuit regarding this. Do you see a lot of lawsuits that are coupled with these kind of criminal cases?
No. I mean, a lot of times I think that the lawsuits aren't necessarily publicized. And I'm just thinking about cases here locally in New York where the child care system failed the kids. You know, it depends on why. If the child care system failed the kids because the parents did something wrong, then there's no suit. But if a foster parent does, then it is different. You know? I
mean, you are looking at that difference here. The problem for these two girls is they had trouble with their biological parents. Now they have trouble with the foster parents, and they were just helpless. You're talking about a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll jump live. And again, the Hassel trial is currently live as well out of Michigan. Stay tuned. Okay, so Norman, it's interesting listening to this, a woman who has to explain herself for what she did, or maybe better yet, didn't do back in the day. What do you think of her testimony right now?
It's compelling. It's a problem for the Rosenbaums for sure. I mean, she has to fall on her sword and admit what she did not do.
And we're listening to some of the stories that were told by the Rosenbaums about a gymnastics accident, but we know from other witnesses that Layla wasn't enrolled in gymnastics class. So what's the defense going to do here when they have an opportunity to cross-examine her?
I mean, there's nothing that they can really do with her. I mean, they can blame her, but she was not in the household with the kids.
Well, what they've done is they've said they could say, and I've seen this, what they've done before, is say, Miss White, at the time, you didn't think there was any injuries. You didn't think there was anything wrong. Trying to say your judgment was correct at the time, but society and her employer think otherwise.
Exactly. I mean, there's just no way to go with it.
Yeah, and so, but should the jury be making their decision based on the decision of the DFCS? So if the DFCS fires her, thinks that they didn't do enough, should the jury base their decision on the guilt of the Rosenbaums based on the decision of the DFCS?
Well, I guess they can't base it on that decision, but they can infer that there was something very, very wrong in that household.
Right.
And that the state kind of knew it, but just didn't act.
There's so much about Jennifer Rosenbaum in this case, about her role, what she did. You don't hear so much about Joseph, but he is a co-defendant. He's charged with a lesser degree of murder, but he still shares the same kinds of charges of, child abuse, aggravated assault and battery and cruelty to children. His role in this, what do you think?
Look, he's an adult also, and he could have made things stop. You don't turn your head and you don't, look, if there's abuse going on, you don't say to yourself, well, because I'm a guy and mom is in charge or my wife is in charge, I'm not going to stop things. That's just not right.
So is the defense going to try to think about that? Or they say, listen, she was the main perpetrator, but he didn't do anything to stop it. He's just as guilty, or maybe they'll find him guilty of something less. Again, assuming the jury believes everything they're hearing from the state.
Right, unless they feel like he had no idea what was going on, which is kind of tough.
Right.
Right, an injured 2-year-old is going to cry.
Right.
And the cries of a child that's injured or has a medical problem are very different than a child that's crying because they're hungry or because they want attention.
Sure.
Or because they have a little boo-boo.
And they're co-defendants here. They're both saying they're innocent. They're both saying there was no abuse. It's not like you have one person pointing the finger at another. Right. These are a pair, a couple, who are together, represented by the same attorney going forward. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a problem.
Do you think, if they're going on with the same defense strategy, that they're both innocent?
That's a problem. I mean, you really should have your own attorney. Because, well, for one, you don't know what's going to happen at trial. And if you're representing both parties, at some point, you might see daylight for one and not the other. You might see that one person you can save, but you can't save both.
Yeah.
And you can't let both ships sink because you're representing both of them.
So in other words, this united front may not be the best situation. You see that there, just that table, all the their defense attorney and both co-defendants. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're planning on jumping live, and again, we are keeping a very careful eye on the Hassel trial out of Michigan. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. We have an update for you out of New York. Mexican cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman will spend the rest of his life behind bars. That's right. After being convicted in federal court back in February for a wide range of crimes, including engaging in a continued criminal enterprise and drug trafficking, U.S. District Judge Brian Cogan sentenced El Chapo to life in prison plus 30 years and ordered that he pay $12.6 billion in forfeiture. Mr. Guzman spoke for about 15 minutes at his sentencing, complaining about his living conditions, how he didn't get a fair trial, the corruption of the United States justice system. His attorneys have said that they will file an appeal, but by all accounts, he will spend the rest of his life in a supermax prison in Colorado. All right, now we want to talk about our live trials that are happening right now. First, live is out of Michigan, and it's an interesting one. It's the Kamaya Hassel trial, this 22-year-old woman who's on trial for allegedly plotting the murder of her husband, Sergeant Tyrone Hassel III. It's alleged that she plotted this murder with a man she was having an affair with, a man named Jeremy Cuellar. He was in the military along with the defendant and Mr. Hassel, and that they wanted to continue their love affair and also gain the proceeds of a $400,000 life insurance policy. In order to get that, they figured the best way to do it was to kill Tyrone Hassel. Now, this is an interesting case to follow. It's currently live. You can go to lawandcrime.com to follow it. A new witness is on the stand.